I'll start off by making a basic Danish dough and then turning those into spiral raisin Danishes. I've added 1.5 cups of water to my mixing bowl, and it's at about 115 degrees Fahrenheit. I'll add a tablespoon of yeast, and I'm using instant yeast, and 1 cup of all-purpose flour. This I'll just stir together. So now I'm ready to add the next round of ingredients. More all-purpose flour, this time 1.5 cups. To help give the Danish pastry its tenderness and almost cake-like texture, 1.25 cups of cake and pastry flour. And if you've ever enjoyed a really nice Danish, you know it has that hint of sweetness to it, so I add 1/4 cup of sugar. A teaspoon of salt. This is 1.25 cups of cold unsalted butter. And at this point, I'm not going to add all the butter, but about 1/4 cup at the beginning, just as the dough is working. So that bit of butter can fully work into the dough. There we go. So you can see the dough itself is very elastic, but look at those hunks of butter in there. I want those in there. Now, I'll set this aside for half an hour to let it proof up, and then after that half an hour, you pop it in the fridge, and you want to give it 2 hours to chill down. So this is the dough after 2 hours. Look at that. That dome on the plastic wrap, that's the yeast at work. The first fold is the most important. It's called the book fold. So it starts that process of layering in the butter between the yeast dough. So you want to roll this into a long rectangle. Now, for the book fold, you fold one end in and the other end in. So that's the first layer. And now I'll wrap this in plastic. Now this is ready to chill down again. You want to let it go ideally an hour. Now, see how it really domes up. And now it's time for its second fold. Instead of a book fold, I'm going to do what's called a 3-fold. And you fold it into thirds. And now it's time to let this batch rest for another hour. And this is the final fold before the dough is ready to start turning into Danishes. Like the second one, you fold it into thirds. But again, it has to rest for another hour. You have to bear in mind, from that starting point to now is a total process of about 9 hours. There's a lot of resting time in between. Let's make some Danishes. I think we earned that. So I find this recipe makes 24 Danishes. I'm going to make 12 spiral Danishes, so I'll cut this in half. And I want to shape this into a square. Now, I've got some melted butter here. I'll brush the melted butter over the entire surface of the dough. You don't need a lot. It's more to get the cinnamon sugar to stick on. Just a little sprinkling of cinnamon sugar. And the raisins. About 1/2 cup, but really, if you love raisins, put more in. Nice even layer. And just like if you were rolling sticky buns, start from one end and keep it as tight as you can. I do trim off my end pieces here. And to get 12, I cut first in half. I cut each half into quarters. And then I cut each of these quarters into thirds, so I know I have evenly proportioned Danishes. I've got my parchment-lined pastry tray, and a little trick here, that little end piece, you actually want to tuck underneath. That way your spiral doesn't unravel. You want to leave space around them so they can expand and stretch as they bake. So these are not quite ready for the oven. One more step. Because the Danish dough has been living in the fridge for so long, it's ice cold right now. And so you have to let the whole dough warm up, the yeast come back to life, and that takes about 90 minutes. And after that 90 minutes, they're ready for the oven. And look how they double in size. The final step before they go into the oven is a little bit of egg wash. Just a single egg whisked with a couple tablespoons of cold water, and that glosses over the Danishes. It promotes a nice even browning and a nice shine when they come out of the oven. I've preheated my oven to 375, and these take about 25 to 30 minutes. You're looking for that rich, even golden brown color. I have some that I've already baked, and I've let them cool a little bit. To make them bake shop ready, I find they needed the finishing touch of a bit of apricot glaze. And so what you do is you heat a bit of apricot jam. You can puree it if it's got pieces in it and then strain it, and that makes the ideal glaze. For a Danish, it's that added level of sweetness. And then I brush the jam on to fully cover each of the Danishes. Now see that glisten? That is just like a bake shop Danish. So now you can see how they flattened out. They're that beautiful golden brown, and then they unravel to reveal that tender flakiness that was worth all that effort of rolling and folding.